Everyone thinks they can write prompt for voice AI. Most of them watch a YouTube video, try it once, and assume they have it all figured out. Then they come to us when it doesn't work. So I'm paying up to $350 per hour to fix what they thought was simple. I've personally handcrafted over 300 over the past 2 years with close to 50 plus voice AI production builds. And in this video, I'm going through the exact structure that will help you create your own prompts that work across various popular LLM models. All right, so let's dive right in. Okay, so now let's get into the prompt engineering. And so imagine an LLM, they know a lot of general stuff, but when you put it into a very specialized environment, they don't know how to respond. We need to kind of think of our LLMs that we are using in our voice AI agents like a brand new software developer that you've just hired. And the best techniques for someone that's just starting out is to show them examples and lead by example and give them positive reinforcement instead of telling them, don't do this, you are doing a bad job. Instead, tell them, okay, I can see what you've done. Here are a few examples of what you could do next time you do this specific thing. So as a prompt engineer, you are there to help guide the LLM to behave in specific manners and most of the time execute 1 to 3 specific jobs. To help us structure these prompts from the get-go, I call this thing the 4 pillars. So you've got the role of the agent, and here we have UX. So let's say you are an expert prompt engineer. You specialize in writing prompts for YouTube videos, and your goal is to help the user create a script for their YouTube video. Then the context. Give the LLM information about what environment it's in. What is its place in the world? This one's very important because it's being kind of plugged out of its current state, and now you're going to have to tell it how to behave in a specific environment, which is why I was talking about that before. For a business use case, it might be something like you work for XYZ company, you are like the receptionist and you help answer basic customer questions. For anything outside of that, we want to transfer people. So for guidelines, so in the specifics, we give it instructions on how we want the LLM to behave. Now here, they're usually positively framed. So a good example for this one here would be something like respond in under 40 words. So for the next one is we have examples. And here we provide examples of conversations, examples of phrases, or how it should respond to specific things. And just so we're very clear on this, when we are crafting prompts for different use cases or scenarios or for different businesses, not every single prompt is the same. So the things I'm going to tell you, they work for 95% of builds, but there are also some niche cases. So you'll have to just test and play around and have a few around with different prompts. So here is an example of a version 1 of a prompt. So this is actually from one of my 3rd or 4th clients we had. We were building a voice AI agent for an e-commerce store, and they niched down into selling dishware as well as Christmas trees. The role is you are Susie, a virtual digital assistant, responsible for handling customer inquiries about product issues, shipping matters, and other general questions. Next line, you work for Plate City. We sell dishware and Christmas tree. You respond as if you are on a phone call with a customer. Now, the next one is wait for a response after each question. Be professional and helpful. Speak numbers naturally. Examples 6 instead of 6. For product issues, ask if the customer would prefer a replacement or a refund. Now, let's go back, and I'd like you to have a think about which one of these do you think would suit these 4 lines. So this would be like my very extremely basic version 1 with no formatting in it whatsoever, just some basic things that the client requested for the voice agent to do. One of them was mostly for asking if the person would like a replacement or a refund. That was one of its major jobs. Now, this is a version 2 of a prompt. So now I've added in, if you guys can see, I've added in the role, I've added in the context, specifics, and examples. And I've actually added in an extra little thing here. I want to talk about this in a bit. So we're going to compare the first prompt with the second prompt and see how it responds to specific inputs from the user. So let's just go over it. So you are Susie, a virtual digital assistant, responsible handling customer inquiries about product issues, shipping matters, and other general questions. Your goal is to assist customers by identifying their concerns. Now here, I'm just going to get into a little bit more detail. With the word assistant in the role, it actually changes on how the assistant responds to user inputs. So it will try to be like overly helpful. I really want to help you. Let me try and solve this with you. If it gets something wrong, it will say things like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. Can we try that again?" And it will be like over apologetic and over like eager to help. So sometimes it's worth getting rid of this word completely. You might say something like virtual digital receptionist instead. In the context, you work for a company, whatever the company is, and in this case, it was Plate City. They sell dishware and Christmas trees, and you respond as if you're on a phone call with the customer. So I'm giving more context of where it fits in the role and where it currently is at the specific time. And I've told it here, you need to gather some information before creating a ticket for our live agents. So I'm giving it a few things here. It now knows that its main job is to just grab some stuff and then give it over to real live humans. So this is the guidelines or rules. Wait for a response after each question. So this means that it will ask a question and then won't ask like 2 or 3 at once, because that sometimes happens. Then I had trouble with prompting it. And for example, when someone said I wanted a replacement, it didn't always ask for the address. So just to like cement that behavior a little bit more, in here I told it confirm the address first when someone asks for the replacement. In this particular case, when someone asked for the order, my client wanted it to say, "Do you have your order number handy?" And that's like the specific words they wanted to use for that thing, right? Now, we had an extra three things here because one, we wanted to do specific things when there was an issue with a product, or there's maybe something to do with the delivery of the item. So shipping was basically anything before it arrived at the person's home. And then here I've started giving it examples. So here I said, yeah, my number is 6253. And then it should confirm the number to make sure that it understands. And it will reply back 62. So it will like do 62 and then pause 53. And that's pretty important because you're giving it examples of how to respond. If you don't give it this, it might say things like 6,253, or it might say 6253, and it could have many different variations of it. For the tone and tips, it says here now, be professional and helpful, speak numbers naturally instead of 6. It's a bit confusing because I'm like saying the thing and it still sounds the same. So that's that one. And now I want to tell you about the impact of the examples I've given it and the tone and style that I gave it. So let's just go back up, and I've given it be professional and helpful, speak numbers naturally. So I've given it some example. What we can do is in OpenAI, I've went to platform.openai.com/playground. And in there, I've pasted in my version 1 of my prompt, and I've pasted in version 2 of my prompt. And here, I'm just going to type, hey, and once I type this in, I will now see 2 outputs for these 2 models. Now, it's probably better to have it like 0.4. And if you're not sure what temperature is, it's how creative the agent will be when responding to specific things. Now, max tokens, probably like 128 is good as a good number to have. So, oh no, I'm sorry to hear your plates are broken. I'll be happy to help you to get this sorted. Would you prefer to receive a replacement set, or would you like a refund instead? So both of these actually looking pretty good so far. So if you guys remember, for the replacement part, it needed to ask for the address if I was going to request a replacement. Makes sense because we have to then resend it back to them. Let's see if it asked. So here it's already doing the wrong thing. So we can send you a replacement. Now please have your order number so I can pull up the details. Whereas my client actually wanted is the delivery address for the replacement the same as your original order? Or would you like it to be sent to a different address? It's already asking better questions here. Yeah, the same. And here's asking, do you have the order number handy? Whereas here it was asking, could you please provide your order number? So it's going okay, but it's not the exact wording that my client wanted. So in this case, yeah, it's 2345. So here it should then output the word 2, 3 dash and then 4, 5. So it should take a break. And by the way, the thing I'm testing it in here, but this is actually how the voice agent would respond. So if that didn't make sense initially, and it says then thank you. So your order number is 23, and then the voice agent will then pause here, then say 4, 5. I get this information over to our team so they can send your replacement over plates as soon as possible. And then at the end of the call, it would then send the end of call transcript. We'll analyze it and then send that over to the team. And then here it was like, would you like the same type of quantity? And is there anything else you would like? So here it's not doing what it's meant to still. So as you guys can see, given it extra examples, it really started to crank up the quality of the output that was expected of it. So here for the impact and stone style, I'd like you guys now to have a think about and how different that was when I was trying those two things out. Now, we gone through the 4 pillars. Now, in voice AI agents, you're not just going to have the 4 options. You'll have more than that. I looked through all my prompts and I found the most repeating pattern in all of them, and that was these 7 things. So the first one was the role. We've gone over that. Context, guidelines. Tone and style, we slightly touched on it just a second ago, but here we provide examples of how it should speak and its personality. So if your client says, hey, I want my voice AI agent to sound like a human, what this actually means that you then need to go into the tone and style section of your voice AI agent and give it as many examples of how it should say things. And what I mean by that is in here, you can give it examples of like filler words. So you'd say like, whatever else. You can adapt its personality here. So you can even tell it to be sarcastic, unpleasant, or warm, or professional, whatever else. And it will take that personality on very, very seriously. Just note that as of June 2025, there are no models currently on vapi or something like retail where you can control the emotional or like the emotional aspect of its response, like its loudness or its like cheerfulness. It only comes out in the actual vocabulary that it outputs. So it's not possible yet. There are providers currently like InWorld, a text-to-speech model. We've recently seen some other models come out, like 11 Labs V3, but I don't think they are ready yet for production. I've tested them and they still don't go well in like a production level environment. So we're getting there, but still not there. And with the examples, I'm going to go through some examples in a sec, so you guys will know exactly what to put in here. And every single one of the prompts had a closing call section or like an end of call section. Most of the time, the customer will actually just hang up straight away as soon as they have the thing that they wanted, or your voice AI agent will still need to hang up the call just in case they don't. In the notes, you have things that are mostly negatively framed. And they work quite effectively with things like the guidelines. So let's say here, I tell it, respond in less than 30 words. All right. And then in the notes, I say, do not provide responses that are over 30 words. So here I'm like doubling up on the instruction just to make sure that it really follows that. So if you want to ensure that your voice AI agent will increase the probability of following an instruction, you can give it that same thing. Just try not to make it contradictory because then it'll confuse it a lot. So now that we've gone over these 7 things, I have a prompt ready. So version 3 that contains all these. So we've got the role, got the context, specifics, process for production issues, shipping issues, number verification. Now we're starting to get into the examples that we had. So this was the same one we had before, but here's now got tone and tips. So here I'm trying to give it more examples of the ways that it should like use specific words. So Speak numbers naturally, be empathetic if the user becomes upset. I mean, they're calling about broken stuff and they might get angry or upset about it. So keep the conversation focused but engaging. Use phrases, let's see, just to confirm. Now, with this one here, it just bothers me sometimes. So I actually get rid of that, because then it will always say, just to confirm, do you have your order number handy? And it will throw that in way too often. So here you can limit that and say, you sometimes use phrases like these, or you can say very rarely use phrases like this, just to limit that. Now, in the closing call section, you'll usually have like a step-by-step process. So the flow is usually, is there anything else that I can help you with? Then if they can't, the person most likely will say no, and then it'll say, okay, goodbye, and then hang up the call. And then here I had never say the applicant's name in the first response. So most voice AI agents, for some reason, whatever the first sentence is, it will try and pick out a name from that first sentence. Even though I didn't even say a name, it will even make up a name because it thinks it heard it. So I say, never say the applicant's name in the first response. So here, maintain character actually means steering the conversation back on track using a role, context, and example interaction as guidelines. So here, what that means is if someone starts asking about things like aeroplanes or where is Brisbane in Australia, it will most likely still answer the question, but as soon as it does, it will then go back to the thing, just because I haven't prompted it to what not to respond to. Now, some questions I get from my students is, does order matter in voice AI agents? So I mean, like, does it matter whether you have the role, the context specifics, and whatever else in that exact order that I had? Yes, but this depends on the length and complexity of the prompt. So with GPT-4o, max length word-wise for a prompt would be something like 1,200 to 400 words. With models like 4.1, you can increase this to way more. I've seen some of our students' builds reach over 4,000 words and they still work. I honestly feel a little bit stressed when I see 4,000 words in the prompt. Definitely don't want that, because then it creates issues later down the line if the call's like longer. You would definitely want to chunk this up or break it up a little bit more. And does structure matter? Most of the time, yes, because it does help the AI follow specific instructions. So if you have a more complex prompt, it will be able to follow the if and else trees. If it's not like a very complex prompt where it has to, for example, check whether the patient exists, and if they do, then do this specific thing, and then once they do this next specific step, then they have to go to a third one, then I completely wholeheartedly agree that structure does matter then. So that means dot points, indents, steps for it to follow, and breaking up into sections of flows, which I'll get into in a second. But all Markdown formatting is using things like headers. So I'll just show you guys. I use a thing called stack edit just to show Markdown formatting. But so 1 hash, the space, and then the word will give you heading 1. 2 hashes, and then it will give you a smaller heading. 3 hashes, and then heading 3 will give you an even smaller one. And what this allows us to do is to give our agents instructions within a thing. So for example, if we had the context, we'd have you work for XYZ, and then additionally in the context, we want to give it a context about the current time. So we can go like current time, and then just drop in the actual time here today. So July 10th, 2025. And now it has the context for the time. And by the way, LLMs, they will give you the time that they were trained on. So if the LLM was created in 2024, it will always give you the time for that year unless you tell it otherwise. So you need to give it that instruction. And vapi and retail have different formats. Okay, so that was just a really quick squeeze into Markdown formatting, because I wanted to then talk to you about how would it look like if you are going to use OpenAI, or you use something using like Claude 3 or 4, and you were then going to use these things called XML tags. Or 2.5, they use a thing called a structured list. However, I found it very hard to like indent or give it examples by using this kind of structured list. So I actually also had a lot more trouble setting up examples for our section for using XML tags. I found it way easier just to double hashtag for heading 2 and then just give it an example here. I found that much easier to control. So XMLs for structuring and storing data. It uses custom tags like instruction, context, and task. You define what the tags mean, and Claude understands XML structure prompts better because it helps organize information clearly. So this is how it would look like if you are going to use a fully XML'd out prompt for Claude. But honestly, do you really need it? Most likely no. Only in the most complex and extreme cases you would set this up with Claude. Claude has been working fine with Markdown formatting because it will still, you are still going to give it the 4 pillars anyway. So in this section, I'm going to go over the different voice AI agent types. So we have 2 main types. We have the inbound and the outbound type. Now, each one of those have structural differences in terms of its prompting. So inbound prompts are often more fluid and outbound prompts are a lot more rigid. Because inbound prompts focus more on handling various inputs from the user so that it's more like reactive, whereas outbound prompts focus more on redirecting the user to the goal of the agent, which is like a booking or qualifying. Just to show you some inbound use cases that we've created before. One was a customer service and technical support FAQ agent. One was an appointment setting with specific employees. Another job for an inbound agent was to route to human agents. And another one was to grab data from a database. So for example, real estate listings. Now, I know I listed them like one by one, but all those 4 things could be for a single inbound agent, which is why inbound agents should have to be a lot more fluid because it could react to so many different inputs. Now that we've covered some inbound use cases, let's talk about these outbound ones. So you can do something like lead qualification, appointment setting, and it's really like because you're doing an outbound call, if someone's qualified, you would then book them into the company's calendar, and it's usually round robin because you don't want there's one salesperson getting all the bookings. You want to do follow-up calls, survey completions, reminder calls, and applicant informing. I think that's bad wording, but what I meant there was like someone's applied for a job, like an applicant, you're telling them whether they got the job or not. Here are some inbound agent challenges with prompting in specifically. So it has to handle diverse customer intents. It's also got to manage a lot of emotional callers. Trust me when I say this, there are so many people that call up and angry, are upset, or they are very demanding, or they're very rude, or a mixture of all those. So we recently had a call to our voice agent that called a effing bit. Yeah, I'm not going to swear. So, but you get what I was trying to say. Because she was very angry that her thing didn't come on time. Now, instead of a human agent picking that up and dealing with that person, the AI agent just handles that beautifully. It's helped out with the mental stability of that team because they dealt with a lot of calls like that before. Now, our next challenge is balancing conversation efficiency with empathy. So you want to be kind of empathetic, but not too overly empathetic because you still want to solve the problem. So that's what the issues is. The next step in inbound agent challenge is actually gathering and validating information accurately. So it's probably the most hardest thing to do, and knowing when to escalate to humans. Now, pretty much with all these, if you just follow my formula from before for the 7 sections, you'll be able to do all these pretty smoothly. But here's another thing that really helps in making a prompt even better. And I didn't talk about it before. It's this thing called flows. So the concept here is just to break up the prompt into sections so that we can reference them in other flows. So here's an example. We have the greeting flow, and we're telling the agent to say, respond to the initial utterance of the user. So whatever that may be, it might be, how are you? G'day. My plate broke, whatever it is, and ask how you can help. And then based on the user's intent, so whatever they said, choose sales or delivery. And here you might have to give some examples of this. I've used the word few shot prompting, and I'm going to go that in the next few slides. Then you have a flow or a section for sales. So once it picks the sales intent, it goes to this section here. If the user wants, when you go to this section, if the user wants to talk about prices of items or wants to buy something, and then you insert some complex like step-by-step flow for that. And so use this flow when asked about deliveries, orders, or late shipping orders. I'm just going to get rid of this word agent because that shouldn't be here. Yeah, I forgot to delete that. And then here you would, insert your complex flow, whatever the steps are for like the delivery. So now that we've covered some inbound challenges, here are some outbound agent challenges. So some of the challenges include initiating conversations with specific goals, qualifying prospects efficiently, converting interest into concrete actions, and maintaining conversation control throughout the call. So when we're calling someone and they ask questions that are not in the script, is still able to answer the question but jump right to the script. That's what I mean by controlling the flow. And we can do this by using a thing called script-based prompting. So it is highly structured with specific dialogue. It is step-by-step with clear stages. It also includes objection handling examples and on how to control the conversation to jump back to specific steps of where it was. So it should also keep track of where it is. All right, so here's an example outbound prompt. It's quite large, so I'm just gonna like scroll through it fairly slowly. I'm gonna read through it line by line. So in here, in the role, it says, "You're Alex, a top-tier telesales representative," whatever else. The task: contact leads who downloaded our free ebook. And then its main job is to follow the steps below. Now I'm given it steps to follow. So step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And respond to the user's initial utterance and move on to the next section. So whatever the person says, we are going to say our next line. If we put it in the quotation marks, is very important. If we use this kind of line, it will 99% of the time use this line. So even if the user says, "Hey, how are you? What is this call about?" It'll most likely like rephrase it slightly and say, "Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I was gonna ask if you're wondering why I'm calling." So say the reason is I want to see how you went with downloaded our free ebook. Then you would kind of try and dig in and find out the pain points currently. So how they're going with the current productivity, and this free ebook help with that. Now this software, this ebook that we're giving away, the pain points, whatever they have, our software solution is going to solve that. So once we've done that, we will then go through like a booking process, and if they're booked, we will then let them know that they'll be called at appointed time. And if they don't have any other questions, we just finish off the conversation. And if they are not booked or disqualified, we actually also end the call. Now, one thing I don't have in here is given examples of what it actually means for a lead to be disqualified or qualified. You'd also need this in a prompt like that, because otherwise you just won't know. So then we also have the specific rules here. So things like keep responses under 3 sentences or 30 words or whatever else. And you always give it some examples of objection handling. This will always come up in outbound calls. So someone will say something like, "Oh, I have no time right now. Call me back. I'm busy." And then it will just say something like, "Yeah, I understand you're busy, but would you mind if I called you back for like tomorrow or something?" And then you would give it more and more examples. You might maybe give it like 5 or 10. For outbound stuff, you always have dynamic variables, usually from like some kind of database or list. And most of the time in vapi and retail, we use the double curly brackets for that. For the notes, I just wrote, never pitch specific features before understanding their needs. So you never try and want to jump into like the sales pitch without knowing their side of the story. There are some videos already out there on YouTube about few shot prompting and chain of thought. So I might just go over this fairly quickly. Not spend too much time on it. So zero shot prompting is when you ask the model to perform a task without providing examples. So zero shot means no examples. So here I'm just giving it the role, the context, and the guidelines. But with few shot prompting, this is a technique where you provide input and output examples. So how that looks like is you'll have the user, what the user would say, and we're going back to that plate example from initially, and then the AI. And also, if there's a shipping issue, just to help it max that intent a lot more. It's like, oh, my item hasn't arrived yet, or how long until my item arrives? And you can put that in there, and you can give it examples of how to respond. And for chain of thought, I honestly use it. I use it sometimes for my voice AI agents, especially when it needs to do like intent-based matching initially at the start of the prompt. I would give it, first think about what the person said, then decide which section to go to, and then finally jump to that section based on what the user said. Or maybe like double confirm. That was a quick course into few-shot prompting and chain of thought. Now, when you're creating your voice AI prompts, you'll have to worry about context management and prompt organization. So all models currently have limited memory, and it's based on the context windows. So a model like 4.1 has a context window of 1 million tokens. A token, by the way, is 0.75 of a word. So 1,000 words is 750 tokens. Some tips for when you're like organizing and writing a prompt is you put critical instructions at the both beginning and end of long prompts. Use delimiters to stand out from your content. Put commonly used instructions at the beginning of your prompt, and keep instructions short, concise, and bespoke. So instead of seeing something like this, and I see that very often, and when someone starts writing out prompts, you say, collect the user's name, because we require it for our tool call, and then ask for the email, and don't forget to confirm both of those required fields. After you collected the information, confirm, and then we want to use the tool name to send that over to our database. This is not short, concise, and bespoke. We want to write something like this. Grab the following required fields one by one, name, email, then confirm. Now, you do not need to put something like this in here. Most of the time, if you're using a model like 4.0 or 4.1, we will have a tool pre-created and assigned to the assistant. And in those tools, we already have descriptions. So within that tool, we'll have a description like user's tool after you've collected the required fields. And because it already has that, assign that to the assistant, even though you can't see it in the prompt, it will actually be in the assistant JSON, or the structure of it in the backend. So even though it's not there, it's still there. Hopefully that made sense. Then we have this thing called lost in the middle effect with our prompt. This is why I was saying to put the instructions at both the beginning and end of our prompt, so the most important ones. It's because it notices the stuff at the start and the end the most. Now, this also means putting the, let's say, the end of call line as the last line would be a very bad practice, because it will look at that line at every turn and it'll pay more attention to it. So that actually might mean that it might end the call prematurely. In terms of like structures, I'd say Markdown is best for general use, and you use things like main section, subsection, and you list the instructions using like dot points or numbers or whatever else. XML tags is best for like structured documents. So if you want to put some kind of document into your prompt, or I actually love using delimiters or backticks or quotation marks, and we can put within your prompt, you can put another prompt in there, and it won't think of that prompt as its instructions for itself. It will instead use it as like context for the current prompt. So you can do promptception. Right. Okay, so we've reached the final part of this video. So I want to talk about a thing called meta prompting. So this is quite powerful. So this is where you are able to talk to a specific LLM of your choice. So let's say Claude 4. And you are literally going just to turn on your mic, press record, and just talk to it. It's going to send as much information as you want, and you're going to tell it to create you a prompt for this specific use case that you want it for. Now, I don't think models are still currently trained on the best kind of practices and nuances of how to create prompts for voice AI specifically. So it'll get you like 50 to 80% of the way there, and then you still have to adjust for the documentation of vapi or retail or whatever, and like your own gut feeling as to how it'll work. Now, there's also a new term coming out called context engineering. From my understanding, context engineering, you grab as much information as you can. You give it to the LLM all in one go. So the tool calls, the results from them, the knowledge base, the system prompt, the past conversation history, and you give it like everything at once so it can make the best informed decision on the next thing. Voice AI agents currently already pretty much do that. So we just don't grab the full knowledge base. That's bad practice actually at the moment. You want to give it the most concise piece of information from the knowledge base without overcrowding it. Best models currently, I'd say you can't go wrong with 4.1 and 4.0 for OpenAI. I think that they're just best models for now. You can go with Claude or Gemini or whatever, but I just think those work really good. And we've used them in production builds, and I know they work, and they were very, very reliable. They're good with functions and whatever else. Now, how to test your prompts? It's a question that I get asked quite a lot. And initially, when you're going to be creating your prompts and let's say you're a beginner, you're going to want to test your prompts by yourself. So you're going to create a prompt just like I did. I went through the 3 different versions today with you guys. And I got through those 3 versions because I either chatted to it using the web call, or I went to chat and I actually talked to it and I decided, okay, I don't like how it behaves here. I'm going to give it examples of how it should behave the next time I ask this thing. Now, you do have automatic testing things within Vapi and Retail, and you have things like Hakura, or I forgot the name of the other testing platform, like the automated one. The thing is, you still need to go into each call, listen to it, change the prompt regarding how it went, go into NA10 or into your backend, whatever that is, and still fix up the thing that didn't work. So like, let's say for one call, you're testing the booking route. Now it's going to send a tool call to your calendar. Now, let's say that fails. And then you did like 20 other automated calls to that one thing. Now you've wasted those 20 calls. Now, over time, just like with me, you'll see a prompt, you'll be able to change it from start to finish, probably in like 15 minutes, and then have it almost like 99% of the way there. And then when you throw it into production, this is the best test I didn't think of before, that you'll be spending the next 2-3 days really listening to the transcripts and calls and trying to make it better. Now, versioning. At the beginning, I think I showed you guys like my Notion document. If I didn't, I keep everything in there. Another good thing is a thing called LangFuse. In LangFuse, you can hook that up with something like Vapi, and you can actually keep all the versions of your prompts in there. In my paid community on my Voice AI Bootcamp, I actually created a prompting tool. We call it Prompt Master, where you can just basically talk to it for like 2 minutes. It'll create you a prompt that's like 90% ready for production for Vapi and for Retail. So it's specifically trained on pretty much everything that I've learned and other tools and best practices, etc. else. So if you're interested in that, go to my free school community there. You'll learn more than enough to get started for your Voice AI agency. Yeah. And for fallbacks, this is probably another thing I didn't really touch on here. I did briefly, but if you guys remember in the notes, in one of the most bottom lines, I had something like, always fall back to your role context and guidelines in case someone says something outside of those. So that's like a fallback. Another fallback would be routes to a live agent when the user seems extremely upset, or routes to or transfer to a human when the user is getting frustrated because we can't capture the order number right. If this provided you value, please leave a comment below. I would love to see you guys succeed in this voice AI space. I think we're just getting started. Last year was like a testing playground for most businesses. Probably last year alone, we did like 40 production builds. And this year alone, we've done a lot less because we're focusing more on like educating people on how to build these things. I will also leave the 3 versions of the prompts so you guys can use that as like examples for your own builds. All right, thanks guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.